Marcus adjusted his cap and stepped out of his delivery van, balancing a large box marked, "Fragile, Components." The glass tower of Novatech Industries loomed above him, a place where some of the brightest minds in engineering worked. Inside, he could already hear voices, sharp, urgent, and growing louder with every step he took toward the reception desk. He signed in and followed the security guard toward the tech lab, where his delivery was needed. As soon as the doors slid open, Marcus froze. The air inside crackled with tension. 24 engineers in white lab coats were gathered around a massive robotic arm, sparks of frustration in every voice. Computer monitors flickered with red error codes. The arm, a sleek, multi-jointed prototype, stood motionless, a $10 million piece of dead metal. 3 weeks of testing, and it still won't align, shouted one engineer, slamming his clipboard on the table. Another shook his head helplessly. We've reprogrammed it 20 times. The calibration keeps failing. Marcus quietly placed the box on a nearby counter, trying not to intrude. But as he watched, something caught his eye, a blinking red sensor light on the arm's base. The rhythm was off, pulsing unevenly, like a heartbeat out of sync. He'd seen something similar before when he used to tinker with machinery during his short time in community college. The lead engineer wiped his forehead. If we don't get this thing running before the CEO's inspection tomorrow, we're finished. Marcus hesitated. His common sense told him to stay quiet, it wasn't his place. But curiosity tugged at him stronger than fear. He pointed gently toward the machine. "Excuse me, I think that sensor there might be misreading," he said cautiously. "It's blinking out of sequence, maybe the arm's not receiving the right signal." Every head in the room turned toward him. The lab fell silent. 20 engineers stared at the man in the navy blue delivery uniform, holding his scanner and delivery slip. One of them frowned. "You're the driver, right? This isn't your concern." Marcus immediately raised his hands. "Of course, sorry, just thought I'd mention it." But the CEO, standing behind the glass window of his office, had noticed. He leaned forward, watching this quiet driver who had just interrupted his best-paid team. There was something different in Marcus's tone. Not arrogance, not guesswork, but quiet confidence. The tension in the lab thickened like fog. Marcus shifted awkwardly, already regretting speaking up. He could feel 20 pairs of eyes drilling into him, a mix of annoyance and disbelief. One of the engineers, a tall man with horn-rimmed glasses, smirked and crossed his arms. "Look, man," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "we've got this covered. You just handle the boxes, okay?" A few others chuckled quietly, shaking their heads. Marcus forced a polite smile. "Yeah, sure, no problem," he murmured, but his eyes couldn't leave that blinking sensor. He had seen something like it before, back when he was still studying electrical systems before bills and life pulled him away from college. The pulse pattern was off by just a fraction of a second. It wasn't receiving power correctly. He took a slow step back, watching as the engineers rechecked cables, reloaded software, and argued over lines of code. One of them slammed his laptop shut in frustration. "It's not the code. The sensor's fine. The fault is in the drive." Marcus exhaled through his nose, fighting the urge to speak again. But then he noticed the wiring near the relay box, 2 tiny connectors reversed. It was subtle, easy to miss, but unmistakable. His instincts kicked in. "Sorry," he said again, more hesitantly this time. "I don't mean to interrupt, but, if that sensor's reading power backwards, it's not gonna calibrate no matter how you reprogram it. The polarity might be flipped." The room went dead silent again. A young engineer turned to him, incredulous. "The what might be flipped?" "The polarity," Marcus said carefully, walking closer and pointing at the small board. "See that green wire? It's where the ground should be. Swap that with the red one. It should fix the readout. The arm's not broken, it just thinks it's in reverse." A chorus of scoffs rippled through the group. "You think 20 engineers missed a wire?" someone muttered. Another laughed outright. "You just saw that and figured it out." Marcus shrugged lightly, his tone still calm. "Sometimes the small things cause the biggest problems." Before anyone could reply, a deep voice cut through the noise. "Try it," said the CEO from behind the glass wall. The engineers froze, turning toward their boss in disbelief. The man stepped into the lab, his expression unreadable. "You heard me," he said. "Switch it. Let's see what happens." The lead engineer hesitated but obeyed, fingers trembling slightly as he switched the two tiny wires. The moment he rebooted the console, the robotic arm emitted a low hum, then came to life, perfectly synchronized, moving with flawless precision. Everyone froze. The room filled with stunned silence. Marcus stood still, clutching his delivery scanner, unsure what to say. The same people who mocked him seconds ago were now staring in wide-eyed shock. He gave a small, humble smile. "Guess it just needed a second look," he said quietly, almost to himself. The lab was completely still, the only sound was the smooth, rhythmic hum of the robotic arm finally working as it was meant to. Its joints moved gracefully, lifting and rotating components with flawless precision. The digital monitor that had once flashed red error codes now glowed green across every line. For a long moment, no one spoke. Engineers who had been arguing seconds ago stood frozen, their eyes darting between the moving machine and Marcus. The same man who'd mocked him earlier blinked in disbelief. That's impossible," he stammered. "We ran 100 diagnostics." The CEO stepped closer, his polished shoes echoing against the concrete floor. He folded his arms, eyes fixed on Marcus. "You said it was a polarity issue?" he asked, voice calm but carrying authority. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Yes, sir. I noticed the sensor light blinking out of sync. Usually that happens when the current's reversed. It just clicked." A murmur spread through the room as the engineers looked closer at the board, some kneeling beside the connection panel. One of them muttered, "He's right, the relay was backward this whole time." The CEO let out a short, astonished laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from disbelief mixed with relief. 3 weeks, 20 engineers, and a delivery driver walks in and fixes it in 5 minutes, he said slowly, almost to himself. "Incredible." Marcus smiled faintly, trying to downplay it. "Just lucky, I guess. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes helps." But there was no mistaking the shift in the room. The same men who had dismissed him minutes ago now looked at him with a mixture of shock and respect. A few even nodded silently. The arrogance had drained from their faces, replaced by awe. The CEO turned to his team. "You all saw that," he said sharply. "He solved what 20 of you couldn't." Then his gaze softened as he looked back at Marcus. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus," he said, straightening up. "Marcus Brown." "Well, Marcus Brown," the CEO said, offering a small smile. "I think we owe you more than a signature on a delivery slip." Marcus chuckled lightly, still feeling out of place. "Just glad it helped, sir. I'll be on my way." But the CEO raised his hand. "Not so fast. I'd like to talk to you before you go." As the robotic arm continued its flawless routine behind them, Marcus realized that the thing everyone thought was broken wasn't the machine, it was how they looked at people like him. And in that moment, surrounded by stunned engineers and glowing monitors, he understood something powerful. Sometimes brilliance doesn't need a title, just the courage to speak up. Marcus sat nervously in the CEO's office, still wearing his delivery uniform, hands folded tightly in his lap. The polished glass desk between them gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting his uneasy expression. He wasn't used to offices like this, the kind with skyline views, leather chairs, and silence that made every second feel heavier. The CEO, Mr. Langford, leaned back in his chair, studying him carefully. "So," he began slowly, "you're a delivery driver, who just solved what my entire engineering division couldn't in 3 weeks." Marcus gave a humble shrug. "Guess I just noticed something small. I've always liked figuring things out, fixing stuff." Langford tilted his head. "You have an engineering background." Marcus hesitated. "A little. I went to community college for electrical systems. Didn't finish. Life got in the way." Langford nodded thoughtfully. "You dropped out." "Had to," Marcus admitted quietly. "My mom got sick. Bills piled up, so I took whatever work I could get. Driving paid steady." He gave a small, apologetic smile. "But I never stopped learning. I still read, tinker with machines when I can." The CEO's expression softened. He saw no arrogance in Marcus, only quiet intelligence and resilience. "Do you know how many of my employees have advanced degrees?" he asked. And yet not one of them noticed what you did, because they stopped looking. Marcus frowned slightly. Looking. Langford leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Yeah, they were so focused on being right that they forgot how to see. You didn't overthink it. You just understood it. That's rare. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see the engineers in the lab still gathered around the now functional robotic arm. Some glanced toward the office, whispering among themselves. The same people who had laughed at him were now replaying his words, studying his insight. Langford stood and walked toward the window, gazing out at the city below. Tell me something, Marcus, he said without turning around. If you had the chance to do this kind of work, for real, would you take it? Marcus blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. Sir. The CEO turned back to him, smiling faintly. You've got something we can't teach, instinct. I could use a man like that. Not just as a delivery driver. Marcus's heart thudded in his chest. You mean, a job? Langford nodded. A paid position. Start as a consultant. Work with my engineers. Teach them how to see again. Marcus was speechless. The same man who'd once been ignored in the background was now being offered a seat at the table. He looked down at his hands, rough, calloused from years of manual labor, and felt something stir deep inside. Sir, he finally said, his voice trembling slightly, I don't even know what to say. Langford smiled. Say yes. And Marcus did, quietly, humbly, with the kind of smile that only comes from years of hard work finally being noticed. A week later, the company's innovation lab was buzzing, but this time, not with stress or frustration. Engineers moved briskly, exchanging ideas, testing circuits, and adjusting designs with newfound energy. In the middle of it all stood Marcus, no longer wearing his delivery uniform but a crisp blue shirt with a company badge clipped to his chest. Marcus Brown, technical consultant. He still felt a little out of place, but the atmosphere around him had changed completely. Where there had once been dismissive glances, there were now nods of respect. A young engineer approached him nervously, holding a malfunctioning control board. Marcus, could you take a look? It's the same sensor system, keeps misfiring. Marcus smiled. Let's see. He knelt down, eyes scanning the wiring. The room watched as he adjusted a small connector and tapped a few keys on the console. The lights blinked green. There, he said simply. Too much interference on the feedback line. The engineer's eyes widened. You caught that just by listening. Marcus grinned. Machines talk if you know how to listen. Across the room, Mr. Langford observed silently, pride glinting in his eyes. He'd told the team to give Marcus full freedom to work, and the results were already beyond expectations. Production times had improved, error rates dropped, and morale was higher than it had been in months. Later that day, during a company-wide meeting, Langford stood before his staff. Before we start, he said, I want to recognize someone who reminded us what innovation really means. He gestured toward Marcus, who sat among the engineers. Marcus Brown, a man who walked in here with a delivery box and ended up delivering something much more valuable, perspective. Applause filled the room. Marcus, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, stood and nodded politely. Thank you, sir, he said. But I didn't do anything special. I just looked at the problem like it was fixable, because everything is, if you don't quit on it. Langford smiled. Exactly why you belong here. After the meeting, Marcus stepped outside the glass building into the crisp afternoon air. He looked up at the company sign gleaming above him, the same building he once entered as a delivery man. A delivery van rolled past, the same kind he used to drive. He smiled softly, thinking of his mother's words, "Son, never let where you start decide where you stop." Now, he wasn't just fixing broken machines, he was changing how people saw potential. And as he walked back inside, his head high and his steps steady, it was clear to everyone that Marcus Brown was no longer just another worker. He was proof that brilliance doesn't need a degree, just heart, vision, and the courage to believe you belong.